Chapter 33, The Flaw in the Plan. Nyoka's stronghold under Mount Amdut, 338 solar year. The guard tossed the bearer of the Dawn rune in a cell with her sister. Syra rushed to embrace her closely. Alinda did likewise. Both were overjoyed and teary-eyed to see each other was all right. The bearer of the Twilight rune pulled back enough to see her sister's face, but still had her arms on her shoulders. She said, "Alinda, what are you doing here? It is way too dangerous. Why aren't you back at the castle? Is Rose with you?" The younger sibling answered, "When I heard they had captured you, I had to save you. You are my sister. We got the Dawn rune. I was with Rose and the others before Nyoka showed up. I don't know where they are now, but I think they're still alive." Syra was shocked. "The Dawn rune? You have the Dawn rune? Where is it? Does Nyoka know?" Alinda lifted up her right hand to show her sister the recently obtained rune. She nodded her head yes to the last question, indicating that Nyoka did indeed know she possessed it. The younger princess was beginning to realize her big mistake. She had given the ancient prince everything he wanted, including herself as well as the Dawn rune. "Syra, I am so sorry. I only wanted to save you. I never meant for all of this to happen. I am sorry." Godwin's wife broke free of Alinda's tightening grasp on her wrists since she had been apologizing so profusely. "It's all right, Alinda. Your heart was in the right place. I know you didn't mean to. Besides, right now isn't the time to stand around regretting the past. We need to focus on getting out of here," she concluded. An idea came over Alinda. "Oh, I know. Why don't I try to use the Dawn rune to break down the bars?" She started to raise her arm and was about to channel some of its power, when Syra advanced on her rapidly and smacked away her right hand. "No. Don't!" yelled the older sibling. "Ouch, that hurt. Why did you stop me?" asked a puzzled Alinda, who was shaking her right wrist from that sudden pain. "Trust me, you would be in a lot more intense pain right now if I had not done that. See those patterns on the ground?" Alinda looked down. "It's some kind of dark ritual markings. It will inflict excruciating pain on anyone that tries to cast a spell while standing in it," warned Syra. "Trust me. I learned this lesson the hard way." She lifted her left hand, displaying the Twilight rune. Realization dawned on Alinda. For the moment, whether she liked it or not, they were stuck here. The two sisters ended up talking the rest of the night about ways they may escape. Also, Alinda talked about all the events that had happened to her since she last saw her sister and how she, Rose, and Laszlo had taken the Dawn rune from the East Palace. The next queen laughed for the first time in days when she heard how Rose had distracted the one guard while the other two slipped in. As she went on, Syra grew more surprised. Her sweet and innocent little sister had committed national treason by stealing the rune, teamed up with strange sorcerers, and had even fought Nethergate assassins and a rogue Nagarian priest all to save her. She was amazed by how much her sister had changed in the last few months. Alinda sat down in the corner of the cell. She was tired of standing. She looked up at her sister's left wrist and asked, "Why are we here? Why does Nyoka want these runes so badly?" Her gaze now turned to the back of her own right hand. "I think he needs these," she pointed to her left hand, "so he can get the sun rune. I heard one of the guards talking about it. He needs all three for his apotheosis or something like that," recalled Syra. "Apotheosis? What is that?" asked Alinda, unfamiliar with the word. The older sibling answered, "You should have paid more attention during Mr. Judah's school lessons, Alinda. It is an old-fashioned word to describe when a mortal becomes immortal. When a man becomes a god. I think, Nyoka thinks when he possesses all three runes, he shall become divine or something." "I see. We can't let that happen, Syra. We must protect the queendom. We need to escape," exclaimed the Dawn rune bearer. "Look, it's late. We're not going to be able to escape if we're exhausted. Let's try to get some sleep and see what happens tomorrow," countered the Twilight rune bearer. As morning dawned, neither had gotten much sleep. There was just too much to think about. A few of Nyoka's remaining servants came down the stairs and approached their cell. One drew a sword while the other unlocked the door. The one with the sword declared smugly, "We captured your red-headed companion as well. She is with the master now. He wants to see you both too. All the elements for his ritual are complete. If you try to run away or use your runes, Lord Nyoka will kill your friend without a second thought. Now, let's go." With this threat against Rose's life, neither refused his wishes or tried to escape. They were led up the winding staircase, down a series of new hallways and into the king's chamber of this unusual fortress. The slaves led both women to the front of the room next to an altar. Chain manacles were hanging off the wall, enough to bind the hands and feet of them both. Neither resisted being shackled with the threat still on Rose's life. The brown-haired man who had unlocked their cell door, now fastened and locked these chains as well. He placed the key to their chains on a thin rope back over his head, which he wore as a necklace, after he was done restraining them. Alinda started looking around the room from her new position. She first noticed the same mystical markings on the floor that had been in her cell. That meant she couldn't use the rune without it causing herself unbearable pain. Moreover, she observed the room had no windows, but several torches lined the walls, which themselves were made of large stone bricks stacked one on top of another. The whole room had only one opening for natural light. That was the sort of skylight above the altar, which Alinda assumed was used to let smoke escape if they were burning something on the altar. She just secretly hoped in the back of her mind that Nyoka wasn't into human sacrifices. The younger platinum-haired woman kept looking around the large and empty room and couldn't find what, or rather who, she was looking for. A tone of demand entered her voice. "Where is Rose? Where is she?" "Who?" replied the one slave who had been holding a sword. "She means her red-headed female friend," retorted the brown-haired slave who held the key. The former laughed to himself as he put away his sword, feeling any danger of them escaping was now over, and walked away. "Hey, wait a minute, you jerk. Don't walk away from us." "Where is she?" "Alinda," said Syra calmly. "They lied. They never had her. They just said that so we would not run away or try to fight them." Alinda said nothing. The slave with the keys added, "Give the princess a potch. She figured it out. The master told us the young red-headed female was most eager of them all last night to protect you. So, that seemed the best way to get you to comply. As always, Lord Nyoka was correct. You bastards." Alinda said angrily, but softly. Syra raised an eyebrow at her sister's words, as it was probably only the third time in her whole life she had ever heard Alinda curse like that. Well, she figured, the situation did probably warrant it. Heck, she would have said something as well, if she thought it would have done anything to help them escape. The door opened again and more men walked in carrying various items. They were dressed like monks wearing simple brown robes and hoods. Also, they were chanting a song or maybe a prayer. Alinda wasn't sure which. They sang what sounded like some kind of ancient language in perfect pitch and harmony with one another while they prepared for the ritual. One of them lit various wax candles on both sides of the altar. Another placed a large urn on the glorified table, while another poured in various herbs and different colored liquids that looked so bizarre and unusual to Alinda she could not even begin to speculate what their functions were for. Yet, she did know enough to recognize that they were preparing for some dark ritual and knew she wanted to be no part of it. However, she no longer had a say in that matter, she reasoned. Despite having no source of heat under it, the contents of the urn began to bubble and smoke like a soup that was being boiled way too hot. The two other slaves with the sword and key had put on their brown robes and were helping to prepare the ritual as well. When they had finished setting up, they stopped chanting. One of them told another, "Go and tell our new god king that his ritual is ready to begin." Then the one who seemed to be chief among the monks approached the girls. Syra sensed him to be not only the most magically keen of these acolytes, but also the darkest. She stared him down fiercely as he drew closer to them. He reached into his robe's pockets and pulled out two empty orbs. The same kind of orbs used to contain runes by professional rune sages in any town shop. He said in a twisted voice, "Your runes. You won't be needing them anymore, but the master does." Both orbs started to glow yellow in the palms of his hands. Both women felt a strange pull tugging at their solar runes. However, both rune and bearer exerted an uncanny desire to stay united together. The chief monk chuckled to himself before saying, "Those runes may be rare and powerful, but they aren't true runes. They will obey the rune master's call given the right catalyst." The shimmering orbs started glowing a more intense yellow, almost orange. Both the dawn and twilight runes started to glow and began to resist more fervently as well. However, the circle with the star in it started to glow under the girls' feet like crimson red when their runes reacted this way. "Stop resisting!" Syra yelled at Alinda, realizing what was about to happen. But it was too late. Intense pain shot up both women's bodies. Alinda had never felt such pain before. She wanted to scream or cry out, but it was no good. Her voice wasn't responding. None of her 5 senses were working. She couldn't hear, see, or even smell. Then a darkness came over her. She passed out from the excruciating pain. When she next woke up, her whole body ached from head to toe. As she regained control of her motor skills and self-awareness again returned to her, Alinda realized she was no longer shackled to the wall, but was now tied upon the altar. The princess looked over to the wall where her sister was still a prisoner. Syra, herself, was starting to rouse from unconsciousness as well. Alinda tried pulling the ropes that bound her hands and feet, but it was no use, the knots were too tight. She couldn't get free of her restraints. As she was looking at the knot binding on her right hand, something glimmering caught her attention. It was the Dawn Rune's image embedded in one of those orbs sitting on the altar next to the still boiling urn. On the left side of the urn was the other orb with the Twilight Rune in it. Lastly, she saw the dozen monks make a 2-line formation on both sides of the main doors. Nyoka's slave informed him the ritual was ready. As he was about to leave, the connection shared between his own half-moon rune and his 3 most powerful servants with their crescent moon runes was broken. This meant only one thing. The runes were destroyed and his legions of undead forces were defeated. He was surprised at this fact, but it still changed nothing. No matter, he told himself. They served their purpose well enough. Anyone powerful enough to oppose him is on the other side of the country dealing with the remnants of his zombie army. They will not be able to arrive in time to stop his ascension to godhood once he took possession of the Sun Rune, Dawn Rune, and Twilight Rune onto himself via the vessel of the young Githalanen princess. Nor had he forgotten about Ursh. He had left his ancient sister and those other 2 unconscious in the woods. Even if they had awakened by now, he reasoned, they were too weak to stop him or his ritual. Plus, secretly he still wanted his sister alive. He wanted to see that look of failure in her eyes, when she saw him in possession of all 3 solar runes, then he would destroy her. Moments later Nyoka entered the king's chamber. He dressed in very fine white satin robes with golden trim along his shoulder and on the ephod, he wore over that. It was the finest type of clerical garb reserved for only the highest level of clergy in the Order of Tessers. Only on special occasions would an Agarian Grand High Priest wear something so immaculate. Since he planned on becoming a god today, Nyoka felt the exquisite priestly clothing seemed appropriate. Even if it was a religion he had never practiced. As he walked past each set of monks, they would fall to their knees and prostrate themselves before their so-called divine leader. Nyoka silently inspected the elements on the altar. He didn't seem displeased by their preparation. Alinda closed her eyes, still pretending to be asleep. Deciding she would wait for Nyoka to make the next move before she reacted. However, he said in a shallow hoarse voice that sounded more like a man on his deathbed speaking than a soon-to-be deity, "My time draweth nigh. I am slipping into the shadows. Thou shalt start the ritual now before it is too late for me. Do not try to tricketh the likes of me, daughter of the sun, I know thy sleepeth naught." Alinda opened her eyes with a look of utter contempt at her chief captor. By this time, Syra had come fully to and saw the Dark Lord standing over her restrained sister and demanded, "What are you going to do to her?" Nyoka's cold gaunt hand grabbed her chin and turned Alinda's face side to side, staring at her as though he were inspecting a prize racing horse he was about to buy for a large sum of potch. "Indeed, this maiden's vessel shall do well enough." "Excuse me," demanded Alinda. Syra added, "You better not hurt her." The women heard Nyoka laugh with such a sinister glee that it sent a cold shiver down both their spines. "Ha ha! Hurt thy kin? Thy sister? Nay. For soon, thee shall be my sister." Mwahaha! Both ladies gasped with fright. They didn't always understand Nyoka's strange way of speaking, but this latest revelation from him left both fearing the worse. Both women insisted on further explanation of these cryptic words, but Nyoka ignored their pleas as he seemed now focused on completing the final part of the ritual. Each kept yelling for answers until the chief monk could take it no more. "Shut up, both of you. Don't interrupt the master." "But, what did he mean that he will become my sister soon? What kind of crazy crap is your creepy master babbling about?" demanded an enraged Syra. An equally emotional clergy leader retorted, "I would think it would be quite obvious by now even to simpletons like you 2 fools. Lord Nyoka has chosen your sister to be his new vessel. His soul shall merge with her body and thus shall overcome all Sindarian protective charms and at last be able to obtain all 3 solar runes and become a god." The girls gasped with shock once more. Alinda was speechless until she asked almost in a whispery tone, if his soul is going to live in my body, what will happen to mine? In a smile of twisted glee, the monk added, you my dear, your soul shall be destroyed, consumed by the flames of unholy resurrection. In other words, as Nyoka's soul moves into your body, you shall be annihilated as though you never existed. Your soul will die. Tears flowed down Alinda's cheeks as she again tried to struggle and break free of her bindings, but as before it proved fruitless. Syra began to yell out, no, use me. Take me. Use me. Use my body. Nyoka can have my body. I volunteer. Please not her. Use me. Please. Syra lost her voice at the end of her pleas as too much emotion came pouring out of her. The older princess's tears fell like rain to the ground. Be silent, woman. Lord Nyoka has already made his choice and no amount of pleading will change his mind. Besides, your vessel was tainted the moment Godwin got a hold of you. Syra didn't understand these final words of the wicked monk. But it didn't matter, she was about to watch her sister die in front of her eyes and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Nyoka finished doing the last part of the ritual. The urn, which was still boiling despite having no flame under it, changed colors again. This time the liquid inside turned into the darkest black Alinda had ever seen. It looked as if all the darkness and evil in the world had assembled into this one space. Then black smoke started to raise from the urn toward the skylight. Nyoka looked at the tied-up princess and then down at himself and uttered, thou failed, father. Apotheosis shalt be mine. Nyoka placed both his hands on the orbs containing the twin runes. His body started glowing as though it were on fire, as did Alinda's. For the second time, today, Alinda wanted to scream and cry out, but couldn't. She was paralyzed. Not by pain this time, but rather by magic. She felt like some dark unseen force was holding her down. She could feel the flames of energy around her body, but also strange was the fact they didn't burn her, quite the opposite really, as the flames felt cold to her like touching snow with your bare hand. Though she couldn't move, she still had sight. Alinda looked around the room for what she assumed was the last time. Everything seemed to slow down as if it were moving in slow motion. She could see her sister pulling at her chains and yelling something, but she couldn't make it out. The monks were also moving, slowing as though time herself had been leisurely turned down. Only she and Nyoka seemed to be moving at real-life speed. Then she saw something new. A purple light seemed to envelop the ancient clergy. Concurrently, a similar purple beam came down from the ceiling which shrouded Alinda. She saw a dark force like a shadow leave Nyoka's vessel, which fell immediately to the ground lifeless, and the mystical flames vanished too. The dark mass ascended up his purple beam of light, then suddenly appeared in her beam of light. As it descended toward her, the flames on her also dissipated. The black mass entered her chest, and suddenly her soul felt like it was being pressed or crushed by a massive boulder. Alinda was dying and she knew it. She started to see her life flash before her eyes. She saw herself and Syra playing as children with their uncle Ishan in Lord Lake. Suddenly, she was at a banquet dinner with her mother and father celebrating her 13th birthday. Another flash, now she was sitting at the stadium in Stormfist with her family and the Queen's Knights as Marcus Godwin was just declared winner of the Sacred Games. Next, she was lying in bed next to her sister the night before the wedding, sharing their personal thoughts. She blinked and cringed as the pressing of her soul grew in intensity. The images sped up even faster now. One moment she saw herself being attacked by Nethergate warriors in the forest with Rose. After that she saw the terrifying headless angel. Then the angelic creature morphed into a woman covered in black robes with gold trim. It was Zeres. She raised her hand as though she was about to slice something in half. Her words echoed now in Alinda's mind, you must be worthy of the Dawn Rune. Then, as if on cue, the symbol of the Dawn Rune appeared, glowing in all its blue and white luminance. The crushing blow of Nyoka's ritual came crushing down upon her spirit with all its might. This was it, and Alinda knew it. Now suddenly a figure appeared in the Dawn Rune she saw in her mind. She couldn't make out who it was visually, but in her heart, she already knew. It was Laszlo. Sure enough, as the light of the rune faded and he drew closer, it was indeed the bearer of the rune of punishment. He reached out his hand for hers. A smile came over his face. He said nothing, but she heard his voice say, it is going to be all right. She, likewise, looked at him and expressed her feelings, I love you. Suddenly, an emotion of complete harmony came over her. She closed her eyes and was finally ready to go far away. Alinda waited and waited, but nothing happened. She opened her eyes. She was still in her own body. The purple light around her vanished as did the black mass. It traveled back toward Nyoka's lifeless, but well-dressed, corpse. The monks, realizing this too, began to murmur amongst themselves. They knew it. Something had gone wrong. Nyoka's clone was reanimated by his sinister presence, but it was obviously to all, even Alinda's untrained eye, he was considerably weaker than before. The chief monk approached his master reluctantly. "My lord. What has happened? Why are you still in this vessel?" Nyoka looked exhausted as he was trying to catch his breath. He was at a loss for what had went wrong. He was clearly incensed and enraged. Nyoka grabbed his head slave by the throat and raised him off his feet and was squeezing the life out of him and demanded, "Thine ritual. Something hath gone wrong. What did thou doeth?" The frantic and choking man cried out hoarsely, "Nothing, master. We did everything you ordered." "Please. I can't breathe." Nyoka threw the man to the ground like he was a rag doll. He declared, "Worthless? All of thou? Fools. Worthless? Remove the maiden, and prepare to do thy ritual once more." "Maiden? Wait a moment." Nyoka looked at Alinda as though he were ready to strangle her even harder than he had his monk's servant. "What hast thou done? Harlot. Tainted and defiled thou art. Unclean. My ritual did work as it was supposed to, but thou were the problem. Thou art not a pure maiden, but a defiled whoremonger," roared Nyoka, who was now even more beside himself than before. Alinda's face blushed slightly. Cyrus smirked at the revelations. However, these actions were short-lived as Nyoka lifted a dagger from a nearby table. The cleric said, "Thou hast taken away my ascension into the divine. So, I shall taketh every drop of thine's blood from thine's body." Alinda's face turned from a soft embarrassed pink to pale white as all the color dropped from her face at the crazy priest's words and knife. He approached the princess, dagger in hand and raised, ready to strike. Both the girls closed their eyes in fear once more. As he was about to bring it down upon her, he relented at the last moment. Anger no longer colored his facial expression, but rather his normal placid emotionless face seemed to return to him. Observed a stunned, but relieved, Princess Alinda Phalanus. Nyoka turned to his scared and confused monks. "The shadows are pulling me even harder than ever. My time groweth short, but I have a new plan. The sun rune will still yet becometh mine. This little whore's body is impure for the ritual, but her blood. Her royal blood shall be useful for overcoming the Sindarian's protections. The dawn rune likes her blood too. I shall needeth some of her sister's blood as well for the other rune. Bringeth me a new vessel orb. Now," he ordered fiercely. One of the monks practically tripped over his long brown robes trying to run out of the room so quickly and into a nearby room where such orbs were being stored by Nyoka. Moments later, he returned with the clear orb filled with strange-looking things inside it. Neither princess recognized what they were, but both were grossed out by it. The happy servant presented the sphere to his master the way a dog presents a retrieved stick to his owner. Nyoka took the orb and the dagger to Alinda first. He cut a small line on her restrained and extended arm. Alinda gasped from the quick, but small, cut. She glanced up to see drops of her own blood falling onto the orb. But they didn't roll off the side as one may expect. Instead, although the sphere was a solid object, the blood seemed to fall straight into the clear crystal structure. Next, he walked over to Sarah still chained to the wall with his dripping knife and strange mystical ball in hand. She really wanted to kick or slap him, but she could not with her limbs still chained. But even if she could, she didn't want to do anything else to put Alinda in any more danger. She cringed as the sharp cold metal broke some of her flesh near her tricep. Her blood, likewise, fell into the strange orb. The weird things inside the orb started to glow in reaction to the sister's royal blood as Nyoka infused it with some of his power. It started to glow a pale green color as he placed it in the now empty urn between the dawn and twilight runes. It shall take a few more extra moments for the clone vessel to adjust and change its genetic makeup with that of the new blood provided by the females. The chief slave told his fellow monks, who still didn't seem to understand what was happening as well as he had understood it. "But my lord," he added, "the clone won't be as perfect as the virgin female would have been. Will it be able to handle your soon-to-be godly powers? Nay, artificial will be not as powerful as the natural. But, it shalt make its due. It shalt be enough to destroy this land in the hottest inferno of the sun. However, keepeth these women alive. One of them shall be used to produce an offspring. In it shall the fullness of my deity be completely realized. And on that great day, I shall plunge this whole world into the shadows, which are at this very hour nipping at my heels." Suddenly, the door swung fully open with a loud clang of thunder that echoed throughout the whole king's chamber. All eyes immediately turned in that direction. The form of a man with two swords in hand stepped into the torchlight and declared, "Nyoka, you are crazier than I thought. If you think for one moment I am going to let you harm anyone else." The man's loud and powerful words made the dozen monks take a few steps back with fear. As soon as she heard his strong familiar voice she knew who it was. Alinda cried out with not only joy and hope, but with love, "Laszlo." None of these powerful emotions tied around a single word, were lost on Nyoka's frail ears. A moment of realization fell over him at the tone in her voice. Nyoka moved forward unafraid toward the warrior with a red bandana. "Now I understandeth. Thou art the fool who took this wench's heart and defiled her. Thou have ruined my first ritual of ascension. Thou shalt not be so fortunate again, interloper. Feel my wrath." The symbol of the half-moon rune appeared above his head as a beam of pure energy resembling a ray of moonlight as it emerged from the old priest's hand. The beam of light was now speeding toward Laszlo. He had no time to dodge the attack as it hit with full force. The energy from Nyoka's hand came crashing upon Laszlo. He raised his swords to act as a shield, hoping that his reforged elvish weapons could handle the attack. They were indeed holding the spell at bay long enough for Laszlo to channel his own powerful rune to mitigate the magic. As the power of the two runes clashed, a sort of mini-explosion occurred, causing Laszlo to fall backwards from the shockwave. Nyoka, thinking his attack had done all of that, laughed at the fallen warrior. "Is that all thou had? Talk. All talk. Now thou art dead like all the rest of my enemies." He turned back toward the orb as it was glowing more intensely now. The monks had surrounded the transforming orb like how a herd of elephants surround their young from a predator's attack. Laszlo rose to his feet, grabbed his weapons and formed a defensive posture as he drew closer. He knew the plan of distracting them was working for now. But, he had to keep their fullest attention without getting himself killed. He started channeling his own true rune with a lot of energy as Simeon had suggested, to act as a mask to hide urgent Simeon's own unique and strong powers. He yelled loudly to make sure he still had their focus on him, "Nyoka. You might have the arrogance of a demigod, but you and your weak little rune are as powerful as a furball herd. It will take a lot more than that to stop me." The ancient Armes twin turned toward the rune bearer, shocked that his attack had had so little impact on the young man. Even with his now weak senses in his decayed and nearly dead vessel, the old spirit could sense the powerful magic emanating from this foreign ambassador from the island nations. Who was he, pondered the cleric. Thus, with a sintering scowl, he inquired of him, "Thee again? Who art thou standeth against my will? Whence, truly does thou comest? What dost thou want?" "Who am I?" Laszlo asked quietly to himself, looking down at his left hand at the rune of punishment glowing under his glove. Laszlo did something odd. He sheathed his weapons back on his belt as a new realization came over him. Suddenly, as if a veil had been removed from his eyes, it all made sense to him at last. Why destiny had chosen him to bear the curse of this true rune. A peace and serenity came over the island, of the likes of which he had never known before. And in this same moment, his parents' words came echoing back to him along with all the other voices and their words of encouragement too. This was indeed his purpose. His whole life and all his ordeals were meant to prepare him for this one moment. He was to face Nyoka, defeat him, save Falena, his own homeland, and the whole world from this madman's darkness. Then, lifting his head and making direct eye contact with the great Dark Lord before him, Laszlo declared in a tone with which he had never spoken with before. A voice that indicated for the first time in his life, not only had he merely accepted his unyielding fate as he had previously once done at the end of the Island Liberation War. At that time, he had saved his crew from the giant rune cannon's explosion, but now it was something more. With his new voice, he spoke as one who had not only accepted it, but finally as one who fully embraced his own destiny and power without fear or hesitation. There was a new inflection of pride, respect, even a bit of a boast in his voice. Not flinching a muscle or breaking his eye contact, the ageless warrior displayed a new attitude that was firm, passionate, and intense. It was a voice that carried up to the heavens with power. And with it he declared, "Who am I? I am Laszlo N. Kuldis, son of Lino N. Kuldis, king of Obel. trained. As a knight of Gaean honor's roll. Dried. As the captain of the flagship Dauntless and commander of the elite naval force, Leviathan of the Island Nation Federation. Destined. As the leader and gatherer of the 108 stars of destiny. And purified. By the most accursed of the 27 true runes, the rune of punishment, which governs atonement and forgiveness, and lets me judge as such. As he spoke those final words, he raised his left hand to his right shoulder to show his true rune as pulses of dark green and purple light started emanating from it. The familiar glyph of the rune started glowing more prominently. Laszlo continued speaking in now an even more emotional register. Why am I here? What do I want? Simple, I am here to pass judgment on you for all your sins. My verdict, guilty. Your sentence, justice. To be carried out immediately. With these last words being spoken, Laszlo pulled out both his dual swords again. The rune was still glowing with brilliant lights and pure power as he started walking toward his opponent with a resolution and strength he had never known before. The master of the rune of punishment knew one way or another this would be his final great battle for the Quendom of Falena,